This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, Real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And you might be thinking something. First off, you're on podcast services around the world. Nothing has changed. It is show as usual for you. But if you're on YouTube, you're like, guys, there's a problem. Why am I seeing the logo again? And last week, it's because I'm an idiot. And I accidentally deleted the first half of our Virginia Tech video, which, yet again, Ricky's an idiot. Today I'm an idiot as well because I left the camera stand in my other car. So it wasn't in the car that I was using today, and therefore I did not have it when I got home. So, because of that, because of Ricky being an idiot, can't say that enough, we are going to be audio only on podcast services around the world, as well as youtube.com/most valuable podcast. I think that's what it is, or it's most valuable pod reel, something like that, our YouTube channel as well. But we got a jam-packed show for you guys. Before we get into everything, though, a little bit of housekeeping here at the beginning. Number one, make sure to check out patreon.com/most valuable podcast. That's where you can help support the channel and be rewarded for doing so. One of those rewards is joining a podcast each and every month. You help us out. Also, go and get yourself an MVP t-shirt. That is down below in the description. You can also catch it at mostvaluablepodcasts.com. You can catch MVP each and every day. And then last but not least, if you're on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, make sure to give us a 5-star rating if you please. But if you're also on YouTube, if you got it, please go over there. Give us that 5-star rating. Tell us why you like listening to the podcast. Because, Brandon, we got to do our annual... Our weekly check.
Our weekly check. That is not an annual check.
Well,
that would be weekly.
Annual is yearly, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. So our reviews for the Primetime Podcast, let's see if it's still the only... Yeah, it's still the only one. SEC. We are a couple of good old boys, and all we're going to talk about is the SEC. But the good news is we have 3 topics for today, and one of them is kind of SEC, but it's not all SEC. We're going to talk about who's got the bigger college football playoff worry after the first 3 weeks of the season, Auburn or Wisconsin. Then we're going to look at college football week 4, Stanford and Oregon. Should the Cardinal be worried about the Ducks? Then we're going to look at Ohio State. Are they a playoff lock now that Urban Meyer is returning to the sideline for the rest of the season? They are now 3-0 after beating TCU this past weekend. And then we're going to close the podcast doing like we always do, Brandon. We're going to make our picks to close out the podcast. But the first thing I will ask you is basically this. After 3 weeks, Auburn this week, yes, they got a big win over Washington to start the year, but they lose by 1 point to LSU. Wisconsin looked good first 2 weeks of the year. They lose a tough one to BYU this week. The upset alert was going off in Madison. I'll ask you, which fan base, which team should be more worried, should be worried about the college football playoff? The Auburn Tigers or the Wisconsin Badgers?
See, for me, it is Wisconsin. And the reason it's Wisconsin for me is because in my mind, I never believed that Auburn was going to be able to get to the college football playoff. I believe there are too many factors in front of them, with Alabama being the number one factor because they're both in the West. Alabama, in my mind, is going to win the West.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think that it's Wisconsin is because coming into this season, I mean, everyone saw what Wisconsin did last year. They were a win away from being a playoff team. And all they needed to do was beat Ohio State. They couldn't do it. I believe that they were good enough this year to be able to do that, to win their side in the West and be able to play Ohio State and beat them this year. Well, the way that Ohio State has played, they've been absolutely dominant in this past Saturday's game, which we'll get into later, certainly solidified that for me. But for Wisconsin, seeing how they played against BYU, their offense struggled mightily. And Hornibrook really struggled to get anything going, had a turnover. The defense for Wisconsin gave up a lot of yards and multiple touchdowns on the ground, which is something that they did not see at the beginning of the season. Even though I know a lot of people may say, well, they've got, Nebraska and Rutgers and Purdue, who's really faltered early, and Minnesota on there, and Minnesota is a 3-0 team, but on their schedule, they'll be okay. I still think, though, one loss now, Ohio State, anything can happen there, but Ohio State's looking like a team that may not lose at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it comes down to it, and it is Ohio State and Wisconsin in that Big Ten title game, I'm not so confident in Wisconsin anymore now unless they turn that offense around. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, they have a big game now. They let's be honest. They thought they were going to go 3-0. They did not expect to lose against BYU. Now that they lost against BYU, mm-hmm. they have an even bigger game coming up this weekend at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa.
Yeah, and I was looking at that, I'll be honest, and this is one thing I'll spoil from our pick segment. I was looking at that game against Iowa, and I was like, do I hit the button on that? Do I hit the button on that game? I basically can't. I'm still going to go with Wisconsin just because I know what this team can be. The funny thing is, like, you say that they expected to go 3-0. Just last week when I was watching BYU play Cal, I was looking at this team and I was going, this is not a good team. I know they beat Arizona week 1, but Kevin Sumlin's not good. Let's be honest about that. And then it's like, I see him getting whooped by Cal, and yeah, they only lost 21-18, but they didn't look too good. I'm like, man, this team's going to get rolled by Wisconsin. Did they get rolled? No, they came in there, played tough, and they shocked the top 10 team in the Big Ten.
But we all know what Wisconsin did last year mm-hmm. to Ohio State when Ohio State went in there and played, and no one believed that outcome was going to be what it ended up being. Mm-hmm. No one believed that there would be so many interceptions in that game, with Josh Jackson being a huge factor in that game with 3 interceptions of his own against J.T. Barrett. Remember, the J.T. Barrett for mm-hmm. the Ohio State. Or as I really like Rich Eisen, the Ohio Statement University.
The Ohio Statement University. So you're saying Wisconsin has more to worry.
I'm saying that, yes, Wisconsin has more to worry about in terms of a playoff mm-hmm. chance than Auburn because of the fact that I really never put Auburn in that category, but also I think Auburn has more top tier teams to go through than Wisconsin does. They'll have to go through a Michigan on the road, yes, and Michigan seems like they're starting to get things going a little bit, and they'll be on the road at Penn State as well, and Penn State has been scoring some points. They've started to get things going a little bit. Again, still not against any really strong opponents, but I think that the schedule is more difficult for Auburn.
I am going to go on the other side of you. I'm going to say that Auburn has more to worry about, and the reason why is you talked about it, that tough schedule. And maybe this is because I had Auburn as one of the teams that could be in the running for a playoff. Hell, they were a team that won their side and was in the SEC championship against Georgia last year. Because they have so many tough opponents, this loss to LSU, kind of like a little bit of a confidence shock right now, where it's like, oh, we came in, you beat the number 6 team in Washington week 1. You're flying high. This team is really good. We're going to do good things. And then LSU comes in and they beat you by 1 point. And it was a home game. And how many times, the thing I find funny, and of course I can say this because LSU won and I picked them, how many comments did we see this week where people were like, Auburn hasn't lost at home since 1952? It's like, it doesn't matter. Anybody can win on any Saturday. Now that LSU beat you, you got to go into Georgia. You got to go to Alabama this year. Yes, you got the Aggies coming in, but the Aggies look like a much different team with Jimbo Fisher rather than Dan Mullen at the head. Not Dan Mullen, Kevin Sumlin. I was thinking the next ranked team that they're going to have to play on the road in Mississippi State. And although Mississippi State is probably the one where I'm like, okay, that one I'll give you more confidence in winning that game than the other 3. The big thing is, now that you lost to LSU, if you lose any, just based off the way Alabama has played, if you lose any other SEC game, you're toast. You're not going to win, especially if you lose to Alabama. So for me, Auburn's basically on, you got to win every game from here on out, because that's going to be the toughness of schedule is either going to be Auburn's biggest strength. They win it all. They would get in over a team like Wisconsin. I mean, just look at the rankings. Wisconsin is below Auburn at this point. But if they lose to a Georgia, if they lose to an Alabama in the regular season, I'm sorry, you're done and your chicken is cooked. You're not getting into the college football playoff.
The Tigers are in trouble. They definitely are. And I think that the reason we saw so many comments this past week on the video...
Because fans were confident.
But there was a reason to be confident.
Yeah.
Jared Stidham has looked really good until this past weekend's game against at Jordan-Hare Stadium against LSU. 2 interceptions. Again, I've mentioned this so many times on these podcasts. The team that is winning the turnover battle... That's the team that's most likely going to win, and that's what LSU did. They did not turn the football over at all. I've got to really give credit, and I'm not going back on any statements, but Joe Burrow looked really good. Joe Burrow, 249 yards, a touchdown, and the biggest thing is no interceptions. I know he went 15 of 34. His completion percentage isn't that great, but he didn't turn the football over. And he made enough plays to keep his team in the ball game because they were losing down to the very end. I mean, it was a back and forth game a little bit, but Auburn had the lead until the end. This is a team, an LSU team that's going to be very dangerous this season. I can already tell you. And LSU fans are going to be saying, Brandon, I could have already told you before the season started. But I do like what LSU has done to start this season. And talk about confidence. They are a team that their confidence is going to continue to grow each and every week, especially with wins like this. And that's what's going to make this team even more dangerous.
I'm going to inject this question into the conversation really quick. Revisit a topic we went over 2 weeks ago. Now, after this upset win over Auburn, does the upset percentage go up a little bit when LSU now plays Alabama? Because at first you were like, not a chance. Does that maybe go up a little bit? Not saying that you're saying LSU would beat Alabama, but it's like, okay, I thought it was a 10% chance. Now it could be a 30% chance. Like, does that percentage go up after this win?
Well, before it was a 5% chance. Now it's a 5.3% chance.
Still confident in his tide.
But you have to be.
I know.
How can one not be
the gold
confident in Alabama, especially the way that Alabama has played? Everything has gone right so far for the Crimson Tide. And again, they haven't gotten into the meat of their schedule where they're playing some of the tough opponents and stuff like that. But still, they are their performance just this past week against an SEC rival in Ole Miss. And I don't even know if you can call them much of a rival anymore, or at least at this point. And they win 62-7. That is absolutely impressive for Alabama. And they have so much talent on that team. There is so much talent on that offense. And with Tua running that offense, he is gonna find a way to score whether your defense is good or not. And then the running game is great with Harris. And I just think that this defense for Alabama, too, they're too good. They're too good up front. Their secondary is outstanding. As long as they can stay away from injuries, which is what I think could be the one thing that hurts Alabama. If it gets to the point where they would be playing LSU, I think that could be the one thing that could hurt Alabama is on November 3rd, is if the Crimson Tide have seen a lot of injuries rack up, because while Alabama's first stringers we know are very good defensively, I'm not sure how much depth they have at this point. And that's where LSU could maybe slide in and pull one over on the Tide. But if Alabama stays fairly healthy, consistently healthy throughout the next couple of weeks, I still think that's a game that Alabama wins, that LSU can try and play well in. But that Alabama defense, it's just something different. You know, just kind of like this past weekend with Ohio State. This Ohio State defense is just something different that you don't see every week. Even when you're seeing a good team, even if TCU, well, I was going to use a bad example of Oklahoma. That's not seeing a good defense. But, you know, if they're seeing another quality opponent, they're still not even seeing up to the level where Ohio State is defensively. So LSU, they put themselves in a great position at 3-0. And going back to kind of the topic, is I do believe that Auburn is in they're in one of those between a rock and a hard place type of situations, and I do believe that, and their fans who are hopeful and are good fans are going to say no they're not, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they play Mississippi State on the road, they play Texas A&M at home, and we saw that Texas A&M is a good team this season
no matter where they play.
Georgia on the road, Alabama to end the season on the road. All those teams right now are currently ranked.
Mm-hmm.
All those teams right now are really good. So there's a lot of obstacles to overcome for Auburn. But the reason why I still think it's Wisconsin is because personally, my hopes were higher for Wisconsin at the beginning of the season. As I said at the top of this segment, I did not believe that the Auburn Tigers were even going to make it into the college football playoff. I didn't really have them near the playoff because I believed there were too many obstacles to potentially overcome there. For Wisconsin, I believe that they were going to run away with the West, and I believe that they were finally going to be able to beat Ohio State. After this past weekend's loss to BYU, a tough matchup coming up this weekend on the road at Iowa, and then a Michigan and a Penn State to have to deal with as well, both teams on the road. It's looking like a really tough road right now for Wisconsin unless they're able to turn it around and find some offense.
I mean, the thing, though, that I look at, and this is what I'm going to say, jumping back to Wisconsin, because you mentioned them, is the reason why I wouldn't worry much if you were Wisconsin, because the yin and the yang of this, too, is Wisconsin lost a non-conference game. Auburn lost a conference game.
They did.
For Auburn, like we've mentioned, their conference is very loaded. So it's like, great. Now if we lose to a Georgia or an Alabama, now things really get interesting. Like they almost need, this is what they need. They basically need, let's say they lose to Georgia. Then they need Georgia to beat LSU. They need Georgia, Texas A&M to beat LSU, and then LSU to beat Alabama so that they can beat Alabama. Like, they would need numerous things to happen now in order to get into the college football playoff, even get into the SEC title game if they lose one more game. But I look at Wisconsin, and like at the beginning of the year, the thing about we said with Wisconsin's schedule is, the only thing that we can't like about this, Michigan on the road, Penn State on the road, Purdue on the road, Northwestern on the road. So far through 3 weeks, Purdue's looked like the joke that we remember of them. Like, they are a team where that first game, there was so, like, ever since that final play I talked about after week 1, that was the boneheaded move to throw the running back to the ground and basically hand the Wildcats the game and say, here you go. Do you like the bow that I picked out for you? I went to Walgreens and picked it out myself. Ever since that moment, it's kind of been like Purdue hasn't found their rhythm at all. And they're now 0-3 after they disrespected you, Brandon. You picked them in our first ever non-top 25 pick of the week, and they let you down this week, getting upset. And then you look at Michigan, you look at Northwestern, they haven't looked that strong as well. So it's like, okay, the two tough teams on our side of the Big Ten really don't look that tough after 3 weeks of the year. Then you look at Penn State and Michigan. Now, I know Penn State, it's going to be a different Penn State team when we get to November 10th. And I guess you can say the same thing for Purdue, but with already one Big Ten loss, and if you get another one by that time, that game might be meaningless for Purdue, where it's like, great, well, we're not going to win this side of the Big Ten. And do they phone it in? Do they try to, like, I'm not saying they will, but like sometimes you get that where it's like, you know what, it's November 17th. I just want the season to be over. We're out of it kind of a thing. You don't know if a team's going to have that kind of attitude. Then you look at Michigan and Penn State. Yeah, they're on the road, but Penn State has not looked as sharp as we thought Penn State would be coming into this year. And same thing for Michigan, unless Michigan played like SMU or something. Like, unless they were playing SMU or Western Michigan, when they went up against their only quality opponent so far, they haven't looked good. And probably the next time they will get a quality opponent is when Michigan plays Wisconsin on the 10th, unless Maryland comes to town, because I'm not high on Nebraska so far. I haven't seen what we all thought the Scott Frost era would be in Nebraska, and Northwestern has not wowed me enough to be like, yeah, that's going to be a good game in Evanston against Michigan and Northwestern. So, I mean, I look at everything and I go, Wisconsin, from this point on, if you just, like, nothing changes for Wisconsin. Take care of business in your conference, get to the Big Ten title game, odds are you'll probably play Ohio State, and if you beat Ohio State, maybe that'll be a quality of enough win to then get you into the playoff. The only thing that both of these teams are going to also be fighting is if Georgia and Alabama are both good and their title game is close, if they play in a title game, do both of them make the playoff again? Like, there are so many factors. I know it's only week 4, but, like, that's everything that's going around. You know, I'm throwing a lot out there.
But the picture is already started to be framed.
Take shape.
It's taking shape right now. I mean, Wisconsin, there is so much more season to go. Yes, I realize that. We haven't even reached October yet.
I mean, LSU could upset Georgia, and that's a whole different picture.
But still, I mean, you for Wisconsin, you're looking at a team that lost to a non-conference team in BYU that they did not expect to lose to. You know, they may have expected 1 or 2 losses on their. I don't want to say they expected it, but let's say you're a fan. Let's say you're a fan and you think, okay, well, 1, 2 losses, 1 or 2 losses.
1 loss, we can get through.
But guess what? You were not planning on 1 or 2 of those losses being BYU.
No.
So now, if you're Wisconsin, you have to say, okay, well, if we were counting on maybe 2 losses, well, now we have to back that up, and okay, we can only lose 1 more game. If we're going to lose, we can only lose 1 more game. And that's it. Because if it gets down to 3 losses, it's, you know, you allow for, I don't know. I don't know.
Both teams need to win out to make the playoff.
You're opening it up for a team like an Iowa who could go on another run. And what were they? 8-4 last season, 8-5 overall, I think. You open it up for a team like Iowa, who kind of laying in the weeds, waiting for this exact situation to happen, and then they come and they pounce, and all of a sudden, the Iowa Hawkeyes are the team to beat in the West, and Wisconsin's hopes just wither away.
Well, and that's another thing, too, of, like, both of these teams need to win out. In my mind, need to win out to make the playoff, because the one thing you have to look at is, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Alabama did have 2 losses last year, didn't they? Or did they only have the 1 loss to Auburn?
I believe they just had the 1 loss.
I don't believe then we have seen a team, like, I don't believe we've seen a team yet that has been like, hey, they're going to be the team to kind of make the playoffs at 2 losses. If you look at last year, not week 4, I don't want week 4. Computer's giving me all sorts of things. So week 15, 2-loss team we're talking about, Ohio State, did not get in. You look at 2016 with the playoff picture. If I go down to week 15, because it keeps wanting to give me week 4, the 2-loss team we were talking about, the Big Ten champion, Penn State. But Ohio State only had 1 loss. Then if you go to 2015, this is the last year I'll go to, you've got 2-loss Stanford, did not get in. Now, that year, we also did have a 1-loss Iowa team and a 1-loss Ohio State team that did not get in as well. But you see my point. There is, like, I'm not saying it's impossible, because if enough teams
certainly
lose,
nothing is impossible in college football. We know that.
But the odds are highly against you. To quote Hunger Games, the odds are not in your favor if you lose 2 games. And now that you lost 1, both Auburn and Wisconsin, you basically got to win out. And with that mindset alone of you have to win out, I look at it and I go, Auburn has the tougher schedule. They have the tougher road. So if I was an Auburn fan, I would be worrying right now. Because like you said with Wisconsin, you didn't expect one of those losses to be to BYU. I think the same thing could be said about the Auburn Tigers. You respected LSU coming in. You knew they were a tough team. But let's be honest, at the beginning of the year, we were thinking, like, there was discussion on ESPN, on College Football Daily, where they were talking about if LSU goes 1-2, we could see Ed Orgeron fired. And now they're 3-0, and nobody's talking about the hot seat in LSU for Ed Orgeron. So it's like, just like Wisconsin didn't expect to lose to BYU, same thing can be said, or BYU, same thing can be said for Auburn and LSU. And now that you did, it makes those Georgia and Alabama games a must win. And if I'm picking a schedule, if you just gave me blank schedules, no teams, and told me pick one, I would pick Wisconsin's all day because it's not littered with top 25 teams. And now it's Auburn. If you want to prove you're a playoff team, you have to, because you basically have to win out.
I think that my final thoughts on this for Wisconsin, you have to be worried about their offense. They haven't done enough offensively. They haven't been able to move the ball as much as they'd like to. And I think we saw that last week against BYU. Now, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a guy that they continuously lean on. And he has 77 carries already, 515 yards, 5 touchdowns.
But what can they do when he doesn't get into the end zone?
Exactly. That's the thing. And Alex Hornibrook has a 63.2 completion percentage. That's fine. That's good. But he has 3 TDs. He has 2 interceptions. He needs to be doing more. He needs to be doing more. He needs to take more of a leadership role, and he needs to move that offense. It has to move through him. While, yes, they want to be able to have success with Jonathan Taylor, Hornibrook has to do more as a leader on that football team. And I would say, I'm not trying to knock him, but also over to Auburn, on my final thoughts with them is that Jarrett Stidham has to be better. He has to be better. He has to play up. And his 2 interceptions this past weekend, it sunk him. It really did. He needs to be better. He will be. But this last one, it hurts.
Well, for me, the big thing is, and with Auburn, I've gave mine. You've got a tough schedule. You got to put up or shut up. And basically, you're almost like, I'm going to use the old Yeller reference again. We've brought you behind the barn. We got the gun ready. We got it ready. You just got to prove to us if we're going to use it or not. Because one more loss and we'll use it, and then your season's done. But for Wisconsin, the thing with Jonathan Taylor, I look at the BYU game now, and if I'm a team going up against Wisconsin, I go, all right, here's the game plan. We contain Jonathan Taylor. We let him get all the yards he wants. He can get 117 yards. He can get 145 yards. Keep him out of the end zone. Let someone else beat us. Force Hornibrook to beat us. Because that's what you proved in game 3 of like, if Hornibrook, if you're not going to beat us, I'm going to make you beat us. Because then it's like, you know what? You made the better play. Okay. But we're not going to let Jonathan Taylor beat us. And that's what BYU did. We're not going to let him beat us. We're going to let Hornibrook beat us. And it proved to be not good for the Wisconsin Badgers in the end. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section. Who should worry more about the college football playoff? Auburn fans, Wisconsin fans. If you are a Tiger or Badger fan, let us know your level of worry down below in the comment section.